Thank you for tuning in. You are listening to book summary of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. The narration is brought to you by The Whispering Shelf. Stephen R. Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People stands as one of the most influential self-help and leadership books ever published, having touched the lives of millions across generations and continents. Published in 1989 and updated in 2004 and 2013. This masterwork represents 3 decades of meticulous research into success literature spanning nearly 2 centuries of American history. What distinguishes Covey's work from the proliferation of quick-fix self-help resources is its unwavering commitment to principle-centered living, character development, and the recognition that true effectiveness is not a function of personality or technique, but rather a reflection of deeply integrated habits rooted in timeless, universal principles. The book emerges from Covey's profound realization that modern success literature, particularly the approach emphasizing personality, image, and manipulative techniques that dominated the latter half of the 20th century, had fundamentally strayed from the character ethic, which dominated success literature for the first 150 years of American history and which figures, such as Benjamin Franklin exemplified, taught that genuine, lasting success and authentic happiness could only be achieved through the integration of core principles such as integrity, humility, fidelity, temperance, courage, justice, patience, industry, simplicity, and modesty into the very fabric of one's character. Covey's central thesis is both provocative and liberating. Human effectiveness is not primarily about what we do or how we appear to others, but about who we fundamentally are as people. This summary is designed for busy professionals, those navigating the complex demands of modern careers, family responsibilities, and personal aspirations. As Covey emphasizes, the principles outlined are not meant to be merely read and intellectually understood. They demand active practice, conscious integration, and daily application. This is why the book speaks so powerfully to commuters, executives between meetings, and anyone seeking to meaningfully transform their personal and professional lives. The 7 habits presented are not isolated techniques or motivational concepts. Rather, they form an integrated, sequential system that moves individuals progressively through 3 stages of maturity, from dependence to independence, and ultimately to interdependence. Part 1. Foundational Principles and the Foundation of Effectiveness. The Inside-Out Paradigm. Why changing the world begins with changing yourself. Covey opens his work with a deceptively simple yet profoundly transformative principle. If you want to change your circumstances, you must first change yourself. This inside-out approach stands in sharp contrast to the prevailing cultural assumption that personal effectiveness is primarily a matter of external adjustments, better time management systems, more sophisticated interpersonal techniques, a more positive attitude, or improved circumstances. The book illustrates this principle through Covey's own family experience. When he and his wife Sandra faced difficulty with one of their sons, a child struggling academically, socially awkward, athletically uncoordinated, they initially attempted every external solution available: positive reinforcement, encouragement, restructuring incentives, and protective strategies. Despite these well-intentioned efforts, nothing seemed to help. The breakthrough came only when Covey and Sandra examined themselves, not their son. They realized that despite their supportive words and encouraging behavior, they were unconsciously communicating a message of fundamental inadequacy to their child. You aren't capable. You need protecting. The crucial insight here is that their perception of their son, their internal map or lens through which they viewed him, was fundamentally flawed. Until they could change this perception, no technique or behavioral modification could succeed. This led them to a profound realization. They needed to shift from seeing him as basically inadequate to seeing him as fundamentally capable and worthy of trust. Once this internal shift occurred, what Covey calls changing your paradigm, new feelings emerged naturally. They stopped comparing, judging, and protecting. As a result, their son began to flourish. Within years, he excelled academically, developed into an all-state athlete, and became an engaged leader among his peers. This transformation illustrates what Covey means by the inside-out principle. Our external lives are mirrors of our internal character and consciousness. To change anything substantially and durably, we must change at the level of fundamental beliefs, values, and self-awareness. The character ethic versus the personality ethic. Foundations matter. To understand why Covey's approach differs so fundamentally from much contemporary self-help literature, it is essential to grasp the distinction he draws between the character ethic and the personality ethic. The character ethic, which dominated American success literature for the first 150 years, taught that success flows from living in accordance with fundamental principles and embedding those principles into your character. Authors like Benjamin Franklin modeled this approach, documenting their efforts to integrate virtues such as honesty, industry, and modesty into their daily lives. The underlying philosophy was unambiguous. Authentic success and enduring happiness are impossible without developing genuine character. However, shortly after World War I, American culture experienced what Covey identifies as a fundamental paradigm shift. Success came to be understood not through the lens of character but through what he terms the personality ethic. This approach emphasizes public image, interpersonal techniques, positive mental attitude, and personality traits. The maxims became familiar. Your attitude determines your altitude. Smiling wins more friends than frowning. Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe it can achieve. Some of this philosophy contains wisdom. Other aspects became explicitly manipulative, teaching people to employ techniques to gain liking, to feign interest in others' pursuits to extract value, to project a power look, or to intimidate their way through life. The critical distinction Covey emphasizes is this: the personality ethic treats character as, at best, a secondary ingredient in success. The character ethic recognizes character as foundational and catalytic. Without character, genuine integrity, authentic concern for others, principled living, all techniques and personality strategies become hollow, counterproductive, and ultimately self-defeating. This foundational understanding shapes everything that follows in the 7 habits. The habits are not clever strategies to manipulate outcomes. They are practices that develop character and enable the individual to function with increasing integrity, responsibility, and contribution to others. As Covey states, with reference to a principle he finds throughout history, if you want to achieve your highest aspirations and overcome your greatest challenges, you must identify and apply the principle or natural law that governs the results you seek. Part 2. The 3 habits of private victory. The 7 habits are organized sequentially, moving from personal mastery to interpersonal effectiveness to self-renewal. The first 3 habits constitute what Covey calls the private victory, the internal victories that must be won before external, public victories are possible. These habits address personal vision, personal leadership, and personal management, moving the individual from dependence to independence. Habit 1. Be proactive. Principles of personal vision. Understanding human nature, the freedom to choose. The crucial insight here is that between any stimulus and any response, human beings possess a remarkable and defining capacity, the freedom to choose. This principle, articulated by Viktor Frankl in his seminal work on surviving Nazi concentration camps, forms the bedrock of Covey's first habit. Even in circumstances of extreme deprivation and suffering, Frankl discovered that individuals retained one inviolable freedom, the ability to choose their response to their circumstances. While the external environment might be controlled, constrained, or even brutal, the internal dimension of human consciousness remained untouched. Most people, operating under what Covey calls a deterministic paradigm, believe their behavior is fundamentally a product of their conditions, their conditioning, their past, their personality, or external circumstances. Popular psychology, drawing heavily from animal behavior research, reinforces this belief. We hear phrases like, "That's just who I am," "He makes me so angry, I can't do that," "I don't have the time," or "If only my boss were different, I could perform better." All these statements reveal a fundamental abdication of the unique human capacity for choice. A point worth remembering is that human beings possess unique endowments: self-awareness, imagination, conscience, and independent will, that elevate us fundamentally above the animal world and even above our own instincts and conditioning. These endowments enable us to write new programs for ourselves totally apart from our instincts and training. Animals operate within the limits of their nature. Humans can transcend the limits imposed by environment, genetics, or history. This capacity for self-transcendence is what makes personal change and growth possible. The definition of proactivity. Proactivity, as Covey uses the term, means far more than taking initiative. The meaning of proactivity is this: human beings are responsible for their own lives. Our behavior is a function of our decisions, not our conditions. The word responsibility itself reveals the deeper truth. Responsibility, the ability to choose your response. Covey emphasizes that highly proactive individuals make a fundamental distinction between things inside their circle of influence and things outside it. A person's circle of influence includes elements they can directly control: their own thoughts, choices, responses, efforts, and character. Outside this circle lie conditions, other people's choices, past circumstances, and environmental factors. Proactive people focus their energy on expanding their circle of influence by working on the things they can control, while accepting the things they cannot. Reactive people, by contrast, focus their energy on their circle of concern, all the things they are worried about, upset about, or frustrated by. This constant focus on problems outside their control actually shrinks their circle of influence. Their energy goes into blaming, worrying, and reacting to external circumstances. A point worth remembering is that the more you blame external factors for your problems, the more you disempower yourself. Conversely, the more you take responsibility for your choices and responses, the more power you actually have. The language of responsibility. Because our language reveals our underlying paradigms, examining how we speak offers immediate insight into whether we are thinking reactively or proactively. Reactive language absolves the speaker of responsibility. "That's just the way I am. I can't change. He makes me so mad. I can't do that. I don't have the time. If only my circumstances were different." Each of these statements transfers responsibility elsewhere, to genetics, to other people, to scarcity, to external factors. Proactive language, by contrast, maintains responsibility. "I can make a different choice. I feel angry. How do I choose to respond? Let me evaluate my priorities and see what I can do. What is within my control here? And how shall I respond?" Covey illustrates this principle with a simple but telling classroom example. A student asked to be excused from class to attend a tennis match said, "I have to go." When Covey asked, "Do you have to go, or do you choose to go?" the student initially resisted, saying he really had to. But when Covey pressed further, "What will happen if you don't go?" Quote, the student acknowledged that if he didn't attend, he would be kicked off the team. "And how would you like that consequence?" Covey asked. "I wouldn't," the student replied. "So actually," Covey observed, "you're choosing to go because you prefer the consequence of remaining on the team to the consequence of being removed from it." A crucial distinction emerges here. There is a profound difference between "I have to" and "I choose to." The first language creates a sense of victimhood and powerlessness. The second language creates agency and responsibility. In that moment of linguistic clarity, the student moved from a reactive, victim mentality to a proactive, choice-centered perspective. The circle of influence and the circle of concern. Covey's most powerful tool for developing proactivity is the distinction between one's circle of influence and circle of concern. The circle of concern encompasses everything a person cares about or worries about: family, work, world problems, health issues, finances, relationships, the future. Many things fall within this larger circle. The circle of influence, meanwhile, is smaller and represents things over which the person has actual influence or control. These include personal attitudes, choices, responses, efforts, character development, and one's own behavior. Some aspects of family relationships might be within the circle of influence. How one responds to family members, though not all aspects, what family members choose to do, fall within it. The difference is dramatic. Reactive people spend their energy on things in their circle of concern but outside their circle of influence. They worry about the economy, other people's behavior, the weather, their boss's opinions, global events, none of which they can directly control. This constant focus on what they cannot control shrinks their circle of influence even further. They become increasingly dependent, victim-oriented, and ineffective. Proactive people, by contrast, focus on their circle of influence. They work on changing the one thing they can always control, themselves, their attitudes, responses, character, capabilities, and choices. Paradoxically, this focused attention on what they can control actually expands their circle of influence. As they become more effective, more responsible, more capable, more people trust them and seek their counsel. Their influence grows because they have built genuine credibility and capability. Living the first habit, personal initiative and creative responses. Covey illustrates proactivity through the concept of resourcefulness and initiative, or, as he abbreviates it, R&I. He shares a memorable story of being stuck in traffic, facing the very real possibility of missing his flight. Rather than passively accepting the delay, he made a proactive decision. He instructed his taxi driver to let him out of the cab. He stepped into the traffic jam himself, and he personally directed traffic in such a way that his lane began moving. Honking and cheering from other drivers followed his unorthodox intervention. The taxi driver picked him up as arranged, and he made his flight. While this example may seem extreme, it illustrates the spirit of proactivity, the decision to take initiative and find creative responses rather than passively accepting circumstances as fixed and immutable. The point is not that one should always direct traffic or violate traffic laws, but rather that the truly proactive person asks, "What can I do within ethical and reasonable bounds to improve this situation?" rather than, "Why is this happening to me?" or, "There's nothing I can do." The crucial insight here is that the habit of proactivity is not developed through grand gestures alone, but through moment-by-moment choices, through how we respond to interruptions, setbacks, criticism, and circumstances. It is developed by consciously choosing our response rather than allowing our mood, our conditioning, or our circumstances to dictate our behavior. When you are tempted to blame, pause and ask, "What is my part in this? And what can I choose to do differently?" When you are frustrated by someone's behavior, ask, "How do I choose to respond? And what will be most effective?" When external circumstances seem to limit you, ask, "What is within my control here?" In this way, one habit, proactivity, forms the foundation for all the others. Without the recognition of personal agency and responsibility, the remaining 6 habits become merely external techniques. With proactivity, they become expressions of an increasingly integrated character centered on principles rather than circumstances. Habit 2. Begin with the end in mind. Principles of personal leadership. Leadership before management. Doing the right things. Having established in Habit 1 that we have the power to choose, Habit 2 addresses a question of profound importance. Choose toward what end? What is the vision that guides our choices? This distinction between leadership and management is crucial to understanding the second habit. Leadership differs from management in a fundamental way. Management asks, "How can I best accomplish certain things?" while leadership asks, "What are the things I want to accomplish?" Peter Drucker and Warren Bennis have articulated this distinction memorably. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. Management is about efficiency in climbing the ladder of success. Leadership determines whether the ladder is leaning against the right wall. Covey illustrates this powerful distinction through the metaphor of a group cutting through the jungle with machetes. The producers and problem solvers are in front, clearing undergrowth and making visible progress. The managers are behind them, sharpening machetes, writing procedures, implementing systems, and generally optimizing the effort. But the leader climbs the tallest tree, surveys the entire situation, and calls out, "Wrong jungle." How do the busy, efficient producers and managers typically respond? "Shut up, we're making progress." Yet there is no progress in efficiently and effectively doing the wrong thing. Many people, many organizations, many families are working hard, being productive, achieving goals, but heading in the wrong direction. They fail to ask the prior question: is what we're doing aligned with what genuinely matters to us? In the rapidly changing world in which we live, leadership has become even more critical than management. We face circumstances that are unpredictable and complex. What worked brilliantly 5 years ago may be entirely obsolete today. We cannot rely on detailed roadmaps. We need a compass, a set of core principles, values, and a clear sense of direction. This is leadership. Once direction is clear, management, the discipline of executing effectively, becomes the tool for achieving our vision. The power of personal vision, defining what matters most. Habit 2 begins with the recognition that every person, every organization, every relationship has a first creation, a mental or paradigmatic creation, that precedes the physical creation. In your own life, you are either the conscious architect of your first creation, or you are living out a script written by other people, by your environment, by your past conditioning. Many people move through life responding to the scripts they inherited, scripts from their families, their culture, their past experiences, the agendas of others. Covey calls this being the second creation of other people's designs. These inherited scripts often conflict with your deepest values and aspirations. You may find yourself pursuing success defined by your parents' expectations, or living a life designed to win approval from people whose respect doesn't truly matter, or sacrificing what is genuinely important in pursuit of what society tells you should be important. The crucial insight here is that the development of personal leadership requires consciously examining and potentially rewriting these scripts. It requires going beyond the external trappings of success, titles, possessions, positions, popularity, and asking the deepest questions. What is my life really about? What contributions do I want to make? What kind of person do I want to become? What will matter to me at the end of my life? Covey suggests a powerful exercise. Imagine your own funeral. Picture the scene. Your family is there, your friends, your colleagues, your community. 4 people stand to speak about your life. What would you want each person to say about who you were, the values you lived, the contributions you made, the kind of person you were in relationship with them? The answers to these questions form the foundation of your personal leadership. The personal mission statement, your North Star. From this examination emerges what Covey calls a personal mission statement, a written expression of your vision, your values, and your purpose. Unlike corporate mission statements, which can remain abstract corporate documents, a personal mission statement is a deeply personal, emotionally resonant statement that guides daily decisions and choices. A powerful personal mission statement typically addresses several dimensions of life: personal growth and development, family and intimate relationships, professional contribution, community service, and spiritual or philosophical foundation. It expresses not what you want to have or do, but who you want to be. For example, rather than "I will become rich" or "I will become famous," a principle-centered mission statement might read something like, "I am a person of integrity, deeply committed to the growth and well-being of my family, to making a meaningful contribution through my work, and to living in accordance with my deepest values." A point worth remembering is that a personal mission statement is not created once and then forgotten. It is a living document that guides choices and provides a touchstone for aligning behavior with values. When facing a decision, whether to take a new job, how to spend a weekend, What to say in a difficult conversation. Reference to your mission statement clarifies what is truly aligned with what matters most to you. The process of developing such a statement is itself transformative. It requires honest self-examination. It requires distinguishing between the voice of your own conscience and values and the voices of others telling you what you should want. It requires clarity about what you will accept no compromise on, and what truly represents your deepest aspirations. Personal leadership in practice. Putting principles first. Personal leadership means aligning your life with your deepest values and most important purposes. A crucial distinction emerges here. Personal leadership is not about achieving maximum efficiency or maximum productivity in pursuit of someone else's agenda. It is about living with integrity, literally. Integration, aligning your actions with your values, your daily choices with your deepest purposes. Covey illustrates this principle through a business example. He worked with a company president who was deep in the management paradigm, responding to pressing daily crises, solving immediate problems, handling urgent matters. The president's days were full of activity. He was visibly productive and efficient, yet he felt disconnected from any sense of true leadership or vision for his organization. When the president recognized the distinction between leadership and management, he made a radical decision. He would withdraw from day-to-day management to focus on leadership, examining the strategic direction of the company, building its culture, analyzing problems at a deeper level, seizing new opportunities. This shift was difficult. His managers experienced withdrawal pains from having immediate access to the president. Others were uncomfortable with the change in their working relationships. Even the president himself experienced withdrawal from the immediate gratification that comes from solving urgent problems. Yet he persisted. He remained absolutely convinced that his company needed leadership more than it needed one more efficient manager. Years later, the fruits of that choice were evident. Revenues had doubled, profits had quadrupled, and the organization was aligned with its environment in a way that wouldn't have been possible through management excellence alone. This principle applies with equal force to personal life. Many parents operate in a management paradigm focused on control, efficiency, rules, and behavior modification, but parenting that neglects the deeper work of personal leadership, of building deep relationships, understanding children's individual needs, modeling integrity and values, produces hollow behavioral compliance without genuine character development. Similarly, in intimate relationships, couples who operate from a management perspective, focused on efficiency, on dividing tasks, on controlling each other's behavior, often find that the love and connection that once characterized their relationship gradually erodes. The emotional bank account becomes overdrawn. Management without leadership leads to relationships that function adequately but lack vitality and genuine connection. Habit 3. Put first things first. Principles of personal management. The distinction between management and leadership at the personal level. Having recognized that leadership must come first, having determined what genuinely matters and defined your personal vision. Habit 3 addresses the practical challenge of living that vision daily. Management, remember, is clearly different from leadership. Leadership is primarily a right brain activity. It is more art than science. It is based on philosophy and vision. Management, by contrast, is a left brain activity. It is the discipline of translating vision into reality, of discipline, of implementation. Covey's maxim of personal effectiveness articulates this balance. Manage from the left, led from the right. You need leadership to determine what genuinely matters. But once you have determined what matters, you need management discipline to actually live in accordance with those priorities. This is where many people stumble. They have good intentions and clear values. They know, in theory, what should be their priorities. Yet in the daily chaos of deadlines, interruptions, urgent demands, and the simple friction of living, they find themselves consistently acting contrary to their stated values. They intend to spend quality time with family but find themselves working late. They want to be healthy but eat poorly and skip exercise. They want to develop professionally but don't invest in learning. The problem is not lack of intention. It is lack of management discipline to translate intention into consistent action. The Quadrant E paradigm, distinguishing urgent from important. The tool Covey provides for personal management is deceptively simple yet profoundly powerful. It is a time management matrix that distinguishes between activities based on two dimensions, whether they are urgent and whether they are important. Imagine a 2x2 matrix. The horizontal axis represents urgency, pressing, demanding immediate attention, and the vertical axis represents importance, contributing to your values, your goals, your long-term well-being. This creates 4 quadrants. Quadrant I contains activities that are both urgent and important, genuine crises, pressing problems, deadline-driven projects. These activities typically command our attention and consume significant time and energy. Quadrant E contains activities that are important but not urgent, developing deep relationships, long-term planning, personal development, preventive health measures, strategic thinking, character development. These activities do not scream for attention. They do not have immediate deadlines. They are easy to postpone. Quadrant E contains activities that are urgent but not important. Many meetings, many phone calls, some emails, interruptions, and other people's priorities. These activities feel pressing and demand immediate response, but they do not actually contribute to your goals or values. Quadrant IV contains activities that are neither urgent nor important, trivial tasks, time wasters, mindless entertainment, and busy work. A crucial distinction emerges here. Most people spend the majority of their time in Quadrant I, genuine crises, and Quadrant E, other people's urgent demands. With some time in Quadrant IV, time wasting, they rarely enter Quadrant E, the realm of important but non-urgent activities. Yet the difference is dramatic. Quadrant E is where genuine effectiveness and life satisfaction originate. Developing deep relationships with family members, having meaningful conversations, being fully present, investing in understanding, is a Quadrant E activity. It is not urgent. It will not create an immediate crisis if neglected today, but neglect it consistently, and you will eventually find yourself in a Quadrant I crisis. A damaged relationship, a rebellious teenager, a distant spouse, or a profound sense of isolation. Similarly, personal development, reading, learning, skill development, spiritual reflection, physical exercise, is Quadrant E. It creates no immediate crisis if neglected, but consistent neglect of personal development creates long-term ineffectiveness and stagnation. By contrast, the person who regularly invests in Quadrant E activities, who takes time for reflection and learning, who invests in relationships, who maintains health, finds that Quadrant I crises actually become less frequent. Prevention is more effective than crisis management. The discipline of saying no, protecting what matters most. Ironically, the discipline of personal management often involves saying no more frequently than saying yes, because there are always more good things to do than time to do them, because other people's urgencies will always press for your attention. Effective personal management requires the courage to decline opportunities, requests, and activities that, while good, are not aligned with your highest priorities. A point worth remembering is that saying yes to something you've determined is not a true priority is actually saying no to something you've determined is genuinely important. When you say yes to working late on a project that is not aligned with your long-term goals, you are saying no to the evening with your family. When you say yes to every committee request, every social obligation, every opportunity, you are saying no to the activities that would actually develop you into the person you want to become. The challenge is that the things demanding your attention are typically either urgent, and thus psychologically pressing, or they are things that other people want you to do, and thus avoiding them may feel like you're letting others down. Saying no requires clarity about your own priorities and the courage to allow your conscience to guide you rather than others' expectations. The power of consistency, small daily choices. Habit 3 emphasizes that effectiveness is not about occasional big gestures or heroic efforts. It is about consistent, aligned choices made day after day. moment by moment. The person who intends to have a strong family but only spends quality time with family on occasional weekends, while neglecting daily connection and presence, will find that good intentions produce limited results. Conversely, the person who makes the daily choice to be truly present, to have meaningful conversations, to invest in understanding family members, that person builds deep relationships through accumulated moments of genuine presence. Similarly, physical health is not developed through occasional intense exercise binges punctuated by months of neglect. It is developed through consistent daily choices, regular exercise, good nutrition, adequate sleep. Professional excellence is not developed through occasional training sessions. It is developed through consistent, deliberate practice and learning. The crucial insight here is that the actual living of your values happens not in dramatic moments, but in the thousands of small choices made daily. It happens when you feel like sleeping in but choose to exercise because health is a value. It happens when you are exhausted and want to work but choose to be fully present with your family, because relationships are a value. It happens when you are tempted to compromise your integrity in a small way but choose to maintain your principles because integrity is a value. This is why personal management is so essential. Without the discipline to make these daily choices, without the systems and structures that support aligned living, we tend to drift toward reactivity and default choices. We do what feels comfortable, what others expect, what promises immediate gratification, but real change, lasting transformation, comes through the daily practice of quadrant E activities, through the consistent exercise of independent will in service of our deepest values. Part 3. The 3 Habits of Public Victory. Having achieved a degree of personal mastery through the private victory habits, Covey's framework moves into the arena of interpersonal effectiveness, what he calls the public victory. These habits address how to interact with others in ways that are both effective and principle-centered. They assume that in an interdependent world, personal effectiveness is insufficient. We must also master the skills and mindsets of working successfully with others. The fundamental principle underlying all 3 public victory habits is what Covey calls the emotional bank account, a metaphor for the quality of a relationship. Like a financial bank account, an emotional bank account can be built up through deposits, acts of kindness, keeping commitments, demonstrating genuine concern, or depleted through withdrawals, breaking promises, being disrespectful, acting selfishly. Importantly, a high emotional bank account does not guarantee agreement or harmony, but it does create an atmosphere of trust and goodwill that makes genuine problem-solving and cooperation possible. Habit 4. Think win-win. Principles of interpersonal leadership. 6 paradigms of human interaction. Win-win is not a technique, it is a total philosophy of human interaction. To understand what win-win actually means, it is essential to recognize that it exists as one option among 6 possible paradigms for how people can interact with each other. The 6 paradigms are win-win, win-lose, lose-win, lose-lose, win, and win-win or no deal. Let us examine each, for the paradigm underlying an interaction powerfully shapes its outcomes. Win-lose is perhaps the most common paradigm in competitive Western culture. It is based on the assumption that if I win, you lose. If you gain, I lose. Resources, opportunities, recognition, and success are viewed as limited. My success comes at your expense. In this paradigm, relationships are competitive arenas. The goal is to beat the other person, to gain advantage, to come out ahead. Win-lose thinking permeates sports, business negotiations, classroom grading systems, and many family dynamics. The style of interpersonal leadership associated with win-lose is authoritarian. I get my way, you don't get yours. Win-lose people use position, power, credentials, possessions, or personality to get their way. The fruit of win-lose thinking is often damaged relationships, reduced cooperation, and hidden resentment. Lose-win is the opposite pole. In this paradigm, the other person wins. You lose. You subordinate your interests to theirs. You say yes when you want to say nope. You sacrifice your values and priorities to maintain the relationship or to avoid conflict. While lose-win may appear more generous than win-lose, it is ultimately dysfunctional. It leads to suppressed anger, low self-esteem, and relationships characterized by manipulation. You eventually resent the other person for making you lose. Moreover, a relationship where one person consistently loses is not truly healthy or sustainable. Such relationships often involve emotional bank account overdrafts that eventually rupture. Lose-lose is a paradigm in which nobody wins, everybody loses. This typically occurs when people become so focused on defeating the other person that they don't care if they lose as long as the other person loses more. The attitude becomes, if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. This paradigm produces destruction and bitterness. Win, standing alone, represents a purely self-interested paradigm. It is characterized by absolute focus on one's own success with indifference to the well-being of others. This is distinct from win-lose, which at least acknowledges an opponent. Win simply doesn't concern itself with others at all. Win-win or no deal represents a modification of pure win-win. It acknowledges that not every situation can produce a mutually beneficial outcome, and in such cases, it may be better to agree not to proceed than to proceed in a way that benefits some but harms others. Finally, win-win is a frame of mind and heart that constantly seeks mutual benefit in all human interactions. Win-win means that agreements or solutions are mutually beneficial and mutually satisfying. With a win-win solution, all parties feel good about the decision and are committed to the action plan. Win-win sees life as a cooperative, not competitive, arena. Most people have been conditioned toward win-lose thinking since birth. Siblings are compared against each other. Grades are distributed so that only some can receive the highest marks. Competitions are structured so that one group wins and another loses. This conditioning is so deep that many people cannot initially imagine what win-win thinking even means. Surely, they think, if everyone wins, then nobody really wins. It must mean compromise, where everyone loses a little. A crucial distinction emerges here. Win-win is not compromise. Compromise is lose-lose thinking in disguise. Both parties give up something they wanted, and nobody ends up truly satisfied. Win-win, by contrast, seeks a third alternative, not your way or my way, but a better way. It is based on the paradigm that there is enough for everybody, that one person's success need not come at the expense of another's. The emotional bank account, the foundation of principle-centered relationships. Every relationship functions according to a metaphorical emotional bank account. Understanding this concept is essential to understanding habit 4 in, indeed, all the relationship-centered habits. An emotional bank account begins with a balance of trust. When you interact with someone, you either make deposits into that account or withdrawals from it. Deposits include acts of kindness, keeping commitments, being genuinely concerned about the other person, listening deeply, honoring your agreements, and demonstrating respect. These deposits increase trust and goodwill. Withdrawals, by contrast, deplete the account. Withdrawals include breaking commitments, being disrespectful, acting selfishly, dishonoring agreements, and treating someone poorly. When the emotional bank account is deeply overdrawn, when there is no reservoir of trust, even good intentions are received with suspicion. A person with a deeply overdrawn account cannot simply decide to change behavior and expect immediate trust. They must first rebuild the account through consistent deposits over time. The crucial insight here is that an emotional bank account is not built through grand gestures. It is built through small, consistent acts of respect, kindness, and integrity. In families, the little things are the big things. A parent who takes time for individual, undistracted conversation with a child makes deposits. A parent who is present and attentive makes deposits. A parent who honors commitments makes deposits. A parent who listens without judgment or criticism makes deposits. Conversely, a parent who is constantly critical, Who breaks commitments? Who is distracted and inattentive? Who compares the child unfavorably to siblings? Makes withdrawals. In business relationships, an emotional bank account is built when managers demonstrate genuine concern for employees' well-being and development, when they keep their word, when they give credit freely, when they listen to ideas, and when they treat people with respect. A manager who only gives feedback when criticizing, who takes credit for others' work, who doesn't follow through on promises, is making steady withdrawals. The power of understanding emotional bank accounts is that it clarifies that every interaction matters. You are either building trust or eroding it. You are either making deposits or withdrawals. Small acts of genuine concern or small acts of disrespect accumulate. They create patterns that shape the entire quality of a relationship. Win-win in a competitive company culture. Covey illustrates the power of paradigm shifts through a striking corporate example. He was asked to work with a company president who was deeply concerned about lack of cooperation among managers. The president's diagnosis was simple. Our basic problem, Stephen, is that they're selfish. They just won't cooperate. The president asked Covey to develop a human relations program that would somehow incentivize cooperation and transform selfish individuals into cooperative ones. But when Covey probed deeper, he discovered something fascinating. Behind a curtain in the president's office hung a chart. On that chart were drawings of racehorses, with the faces of the company's managers superimposed on each horse. At the end of the track was a beautiful travel poster of Bermuda, an idyllic beach paradise. Each week, the president would bring his managers into his office and say, "Let's all work together. We'll all make more money if we do." Then he would pull back the curtain and ask, "Now which of you is going to win the trip to Bermuda?" The difference is dramatic. The president was sending two completely contradictory messages. His words advocated cooperation, but his reward system created competition. In such a system, one manager's success directly meant failure for other managers. He was essentially asking his people to cooperate while simultaneously creating a structure that punished cooperation and rewarded individual success at others' expense. As Covey notes, this is like watering one flower while asking another to grow, or like saying, "Firings will continue until morale improves." The solution was not a clever motivational technique or human relations training. The solution was to align the underlying paradigm and incentive system with the goal of cooperation. When the company restructured its information and reward systems to genuinely reinforce cooperative behavior and mutual benefit, cooperation increased naturally. People responded rationally to incentives that rewarded what they were being asked to do. The crucial insight here is that you cannot achieve the fruits of cooperation from a competitive paradigm. The root determines the fruit, and as long as the underlying system penalizes cooperation and rewards individual success at others' expense, no amount of motivational training will create genuine cooperation. The maturity continuum and genuine win-win. An important nuance in understanding win-win is recognizing that genuine win-win thinking requires a degree of maturity and security that not all relationships or contexts can immediately achieve. Covey articulates this through the concept of a maturity continuum. Dependent people, those who function primarily from dependence on others, can aspire to lose-win thinking. They need others to take care of them, so subordinating their interests seems appropriate. Independent people can aspire to win thinking. They can succeed on their own. But to achieve genuine win-win thinking, to care deeply about both your own success and the other person's well-being, to seek solutions that benefit both, requires a level of security and inner confidence that makes it possible to be genuinely unselfish. A point worth remembering is that win-win thinking is not for the insecure. Only a person secure in their own worth can genuinely rejoice in another's success. Only a person who doesn't need to dominate others can truly cooperate. Only a person secure enough not to need external validation can listen deeply to others' needs and genuinely seek mutual benefit. This is why the private victory habits, habits 1 to 3, must come before the public victory. Habits, personal security, clarity of values, and personal discipline create the foundation from which genuine win-win thinking becomes possible. A person who is constantly reactive, whose self-worth is determined by others' opinions, and who is undisciplined in their personal choices is not in a position to think win-win. But a person who has achieved personal proactivity, clarity about what matters most, and personal discipline can approach relationships with the security and generosity that win-win requires. Habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Principles of empathic communication. The universal human hunger to be understood. Few needs of the human heart are greater than the need to be understood, to have a voice that is heard, respected, and valued, to have your experience recognized as legitimate, to feel that someone comprehends not just your words but your deeper meaning, your concerns, your aspirations. This hunger to be understood is so fundamental to human well-being that its absence creates profound loneliness even in the midst of relationships. Yet in most human communication, particularly in conflict situations or situations involving significant disagreement, this deep need for understanding goes unmet. Instead of listening to understand, people listen to respond. While another person is speaking, they are busy constructing their response, planning their rebuttal, thinking about what they will say when it's their turn. They hear the words but miss the meaning. They hear the position but not the underlying concerns. They listen from their own frame of reference, interpreting the other person's words through their own lens rather than genuinely stepping into the other person's experience. Covey identifies a profound principle of influence. The real beginning of influence comes as others sense that you are being influenced by them, when they feel understood by you, when you have listened deeply and sincerely and are genuinely open. This principle runs counter to conventional wisdom. Most people believe that the key to influence is communication, getting your point across clearly, speaking persuasively, being articulate. But authentic influence, the kind that creates real change in another person, flows not primarily from being a good talker but from being a good listener. Empathic listening, the foundation of genuine understanding. To seek first to understand requires what Covey calls empathic listening. This is listening at the deepest level, not merely to the words but to the emotion, the experience, the meaning underlying the words. Covey identifies several levels of listening, beginning with the most superficial. Ignoring is the first level. You are not even listening. You are genuinely unaware the other person is trying to communicate. Pretend listening is the second level. You appear to be listening. I see, but your mind is elsewhere. Selective listening is the third level. You listen, but you only attend to the parts that interest you or confirm what you already believe. You screen out contradictory information. Attentive listening is the fourth level. You are genuinely paying attention. You are present to the communication. You understand the words being spoken and you are trying to follow the logic. Empathic listening is the fifth and deepest level. You listen not just to the words and the logic, but to the emotion, the meaning, the experience beneath the words. You temporarily suspend your own frame of reference and step into the other person's world. You listen to understand, not to respond. A crucial distinction emerges here. Most people listen from their own frame of reference, interpreting the other person's communication through the lens of their own experience, values, and concerns. True empathic listening requires temporarily suspending your own frame of reference entirely and genuinely entering into the other person's frame of reference. This is extraordinarily difficult because it requires a degree of emotional security and humility. To listen empathically to someone who disagrees with you, you must be secure enough that you don't experience their disagreement as a personal attack. You must have enough confidence in your own understanding that you don't need them to agree with you immediately. You must care more about understanding them than about being understood, at least in this moment. The diagnostic power of understanding. A second principle underlying Habit 5 is what Covey calls the diagnostic power of understanding. Before you can effectively help someone, influence them, or solve a problem in your relationship with them, You must deeply understand their perspective, their concerns, their fears, their aspirations, their constraints. In medicine, a physician who prescribes treatment without diagnosis is practicing malpractice. Yet in human relationships, this is standard practice. Parents prescribe solutions to their teenagers' problems without genuinely understanding what the teenager is experiencing. Spouses offer advice without understanding their partner's deeper concerns. Managers implement changes without understanding their employees' fears and reservations. A point worth remembering is that if you prescribe before you diagnose, you will likely prescribe the wrong solution. And because you prescribed before understanding, the other person will not feel understood, will not trust your solution, and will resist even if your solution is theoretically correct. By contrast, when you genuinely understand another person, when you have listened deeply enough to grasp not just what they think but why they think it, not just what they feel but why they feel it, you gain the ability to address their actual concerns. You can offer solutions that address the real problem rather than your assumption about the problem. And because the other person feels genuinely understood, they are much more open to your perspective and your proposed solutions. The courage to be vulnerable, creating safety for understanding. Empathic listening requires vulnerability. It requires being open to being changed or influenced by what you hear. It requires acknowledging that you might not fully understand the other person or that your perspective might be incomplete. Many people resist this vulnerability. They fear that if they truly listen to another perspective, they might be infected by it, might lose their conviction, might be seen as weak or uncertain. They fear that admitting they don't understand gives power to the other person. But the paradox is profound. The person who is secure enough to truly listen, to be influenced, to be changed by genuine understanding of another, is more powerful, not less, because they have information you didn't have, because they gain insight into how the other person thinks, because they create a level of trust and openness that makes genuine cooperation possible. Covey illustrates this through multiple examples. A parent who is willing to genuinely listen to their teenager, not to interrupt, not to judge, not to immediately offer solutions, but to truly understand what the teenager is experiencing, often discovers that the teenager's concerns are quite different from what the parent assumed. The parent might hear fear beneath apparent rebellion, or a desperate hunger for connection beneath apparent distance. Once genuinely understood, the teenager often becomes much more open to the parent's perspective. A manager who is willing to genuinely listen to an employee who is struggling with a decision, not to immediately tell them what to do, but to understand what factors are causing the difficulty, what constraints they perceive, what values are in tension, often discovers that the employee has important information and perspectives the manager lacks. The manager's willingness to listen creates an environment where the employee feels safe being more open and honest. A couple in conflict who take the time to genuinely listen to each other, setting aside the urge to defend themselves or attack the other person, truly trying to understand what the other person is experiencing, often find that much of the bitterness begins to dissipate, not because they suddenly agree, but because they feel genuinely understood, because they recognize that the other person is not attacking them out of malice but out of legitimate concerns. Habit 6. Synergize. Principles of creative cooperation. The principle of synergy. 1 + 1 = more than 2. The word synergy is often used casually, but Covey uses it with precision to mean the creation of a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. Mathematically, this would be expressed as 1 + 1 = 3, or more. Synergy creates new options, new possibilities, new solutions that could not have been created by individuals working in isolation or in opposition to one another. Synergy is possible only in the presence of genuine diversity. If everyone thinks the same way, has the same perspective, values the same things, and approaches problems from the same angle, there is no synergy possible, only the reinforcement of existing patterns. True synergy requires difference. However, difference is not automatically synergistic. Difference coupled with opposition, judgment, and desire to win creates conflict. not synergy. Difference coupled with genuine respect, authentic listening, and a commitment to seeking a better solution creates synergy. The prerequisites for synergy. The first 5 habits. True synergy is only possible when certain conditions exist, and these conditions are precisely the conditions created by the practice of the first 5 habits. Synergy requires proactivity. Habit 1. Because synergistic individuals don't passively accept the first solution proposed, they actively seek better ways. Synergy requires personal vision and values. Habit 2. Because genuine synergy is not unprincipled compromise. It requires that participants have clarity about what matters to them and are willing to hold their ground on matters of principle while remaining open to new approaches. Synergy requires personal discipline and focus on what matters. Habit 3. Because creating real solutions takes time and energy, it requires the discipline to persist in seeking better solutions rather than settling for quick fixes. Synergy requires the win-win paradigm. Habit 4. Because if you are primarily concerned with winning while the other person loses, you are not open to solutions that benefit both. Your closed mindset prevents the emergence of new possibilities. Synergy absolutely requires genuine empathic listening. Habit 5. Because true synergy is only possible when you genuinely understand the other person's perspective, and they genuinely understand yours. Without such understanding, proposals are misunderstood, concerns are not properly addressed, and what emerges is not genuine synergy but rather a solution that benefits some while frustrating others. The 3 levels of communication. Covey identifies 3 levels of communication, providing a framework for understanding where most relationships operate and how to move toward synergy. Defensive communication is the first level. When people are engaged in defensive communication, they are focused on protecting their position, on not losing, on defending what they believe. They interpret others' comments as attacks. They respond to defend themselves rather than to understand. Defensive communication is characterized by defensiveness, closed-mindedness, and a low emotional bank account. Little real understanding occurs at this level. Respectful communication is the second level. At this level, people are trying to be respectful, are listening reasonably well, are attempting to understand. There is less defensiveness, more openness. However, at the level of respectful communication, people are still operating from their own frames of reference. They are trying to be fair, but they are not genuinely understanding each other deeply, nor are they genuinely seeking solutions that would be better than each could create alone. Synergistic communication is the third level. At this level, people are genuinely listening to understand. They are secure enough to be influenced. They are open to possibilities they haven't imagined. At this level, something genuinely new can emerge. People are not trying to convince each other. They are genuinely collaborating to discover a solution that is better than either could have created alone. The creative power of genuine collaboration. Synergy produces solutions to problems that would not have been discovered through independent effort or conventional problem solving. When two people genuinely collaborate, bringing their different perspectives, different experiences, different values, and genuinely listen to each other while remaining open to new possibilities, solutions emerge that neither anticipated. The author illustrates this through a visual representation showing that if you take two people, with very different viewpoints and genuine respect for each other, both committed to understanding the other and seeking a better solution, they can move from opposing positions to a higher solution, one that is better in the sense that it addresses the real concerns underlying both positions, while creating something neither anticipated. This principle applies to everything from personal relationships to organizational challenges to scientific breakthroughs. The most creative solutions often come from bringing different perspectives together in an environment of genuine respect and openness. The cultural challenge. Teaching synergy in a competitive world. A significant challenge to developing synergy is that modern culture is deeply scripted in competition and win-lose thinking. Schools pit students against each other through grades. Sports celebrate one team's victory as another's defeat. Business is often framed as competition. Even within families, siblings are compared and competed against. This conditioning runs so deep that many people initially cannot imagine what genuine synergy would look like. When asked to work synergistically with someone with whom they disagree, they often interpret it as either capitulating, lose-win, or compromising, lose-lose. Yet the crucial insight here is that genuine synergy is achievable, even among people with significant disagreement, when the conditions are right. Genuine respect, authentic listening, proactive search for better solutions, and commitment to principle-centered thinking. Part 4. The Seventh Habit and Renewal. Habit 7. Sharpen the saw. Principles of balanced self-renewal. The metaphor of the saw, maintenance and sharpening. The metaphor Covey uses for the seventh habit is simple yet profound. Imagine a person cutting wood with a saw. For hours, they work diligently, cutting, but as they work, the saw becomes dull. It takes more and more effort to make the same cut. Eventually, the saw is so dull that progress nearly stops. Someone suggests, "Why don't you stop and sharpen the saw?" The person replies, "I don't have time. I'm too busy cutting." This image captures the condition of many people in modern life. They are busy, productive, cutting away at their tasks, but they never stop to sharpen the saw, to invest in renewal, growth, and the development of their capacities. As a result, their saw becomes increasingly dull. It takes more and more effort to accomplish less and less. Their productivity and effectiveness decline, not because they are not working hard, but because the tool with which they are working is deteriorating. Sharpen the saw is the seventh habit because it is the habit that enables all the other habits to work effectively over time. Without renewal, the practices of the first 6 habits eventually become mechanical and hollow, but with regular, deliberate renewal, all 7 habits together create an upward spiral of growth and effectiveness. The 4 dimensions of human nature. Covey identifies 4 fundamental dimensions of human nature, and renewal must address each dimension. The physical dimension refers to your body, its health, vigor, and physical capacity. Renewal of the physical dimension involves regular exercise, proper nutrition, adequate sleep, and preventive health care. Many people neglect their physical dimension, either from overwork or from a false belief that they don't have time for exercise or healthy eating. Yet a point worth remembering is that physical renewal is not a luxury. It is a requirement for sustained effectiveness and mental clarity. The mental dimension refers to your mind, your learning, growth, and intellectual development. Renewal of the mental dimension involves reading, learning, formal education, skill development, and intellectual engagement with ideas. Covey emphasizes that in a world of constant change, continuous learning is not optional. Those who neglect mental renewal become increasingly obsolete in their fields and increasingly limited in their ability to understand and navigate complex problems. The emotional dimension refers to your heart, your feelings, relationships, and emotional connections with others. Renewal of the emotional dimension involves investing in meaningful relationships, practicing empathy, serving others, and engaging in activities that bring joy and fulfillment. Many people prioritize work and external accomplishment while neglecting emotional connections, and they find themselves successful by external measures but profoundly empty internally. The spiritual dimension refers to your sense of meaning, purpose, and connection to something larger than yourself. For some people, this dimension is explicitly religious. For others, it may involve connection to nature, commitment to a cause, or deep engagement with art or philosophy. Renewal of the spiritual dimension involves activities that connect you to your deepest values and sense of purpose. The crucial insight here is that true renewal requires attention to all 4 dimensions. A person who exercises regularly, physical, but who is emotionally isolated and spiritually empty is not truly renewed. A person who is mentally stimulated but physically exhausted will eventually find their mental abilities decline. Integrated renewal addresses all 4 dimensions in balance. The principle of synergy within the self. An important principle underlying habit 7 is that these 4 dimensions of human nature are not separate, they are synergistic. Renewal in one dimension supports renewal in others. Regular physical exercise not only improves physical health but also clarifies mental thinking and elevates emotional mood. Meaningful relationships and emotional connection improve physical health and provide motivation for personal growth. Spiritual connection and sense of purpose provide the motivation to invest in physical, mental, and emotional development. Conversely, neglect in one dimension undermines the others. Chronic physical exhaustion impairs mental clarity and emotional resilience. Emotional isolation and lack of meaningful relationships diminish motivation for self-improvement. Lack of spiritual connection or sense of purpose makes sustained effort feel pointless. The personal renewal habit, winning the daily private victory. Covey emphasizes that renewal is not something that happens through occasional vacations or periodic retreats. Real renewal happens through consistent daily practices that address all 4 dimensions. He illustrates this through the concept of winning the daily private victory. This involves beginning each day with a period of renewal, time for reflection, meditation, reading, prayer, depending on one's belief system, physical exercise, and planning. This time, often early in the morning before the demands of the day begin, creates a center of calm and clarity from which to approach the day. During this time, a person reaffirms their values, reflects on what matters most, prepares themselves mentally and emotionally for the challenges ahead, and recommits to living in accordance with their deepest principles. This daily practice of private victory is what enables the public victories of the day to align with one's values and purposes. Without this daily renewal, people tend to drift into reactivity. They respond to whatever demands press most urgently. They are tossed about by others' expectations and circumstances, and they find themselves at day's end having accomplished much but having advanced nothing that truly mattered. With this daily practice of private victory, people approach each day from a position of intentionality and alignment. They are in the best position to live the habits they have committed to respond proactively rather than reactively, to make choices aligned with their values rather than driven by circumstances. Renewal through contribution, sharpening the saw while helping others. An important nuance that Covey emphasizes is that renewal does not require withdrawal from the world or from one's responsibilities. True renewal is, for most people, best achieved through engaged contribution to others. A parent who invests in understanding their child, who takes time to listen deeply, who creates space for meaningful connection. That parent is not distracted from their responsibilities. They are fulfilling their most important responsibility while simultaneously engaging in emotional and spiritual renewal. A teacher who brings full presence and authenticity to their work, who genuinely cares about their students' growth, who is learning and growing alongside their students. That teacher is not adding to their burden. They are finding renewal through their work. The paradox is that genuine renewal often comes through giving, not through withdrawal. The person who is contributing meaningfully to others, who is growing and learning in the context of serving others, who is making a difference, that person is renewing themselves even as they sharpen their saw. The upward spiral, the integrating effect of all 7 habits. As Covey emphasizes, the 7 habits are not separate, they form an integrated system. The practice of each habit supports and enhances the practice of the others. Together, they create what Covey calls an upward spiral of growth. In the absence of these habits, people tend to move in a downward spiral. Without proactivity, they become increasingly reactive and victim-oriented. Without personal vision and leadership, they drift into living out others' scripts. Without personal discipline, they find themselves ineffective despite good intentions. Without win-win thinking, their relationships become competitive and diminishing. Without empathic listening, they remain isolated in their own perspective. Without synergy, they miss the creative possibilities that come from genuine collaboration. Without renewal, they become increasingly depleted and ineffective. But with the practice of all 7 habits, the opposite occurs. Each habit reinforces the others. Proactivity enables personal leadership. Personal leadership creates the clarity and discipline of habit 3. This personal strength enables genuine win-win thinking. Win-win thinking makes empathic listening both more important and more possible. Empathic listening creates the conditions for synergy, and all of this is sustained through regular renewal. As one practices these habits, one does not move laterally, practicing the same habits at the same level year after year. Rather, one moves in an upward spiral. Each complete cycle through the habits moves you to a higher level of effectiveness, understanding, integration, and character. Comprehensive recap. The 7 habits in integration. The maturity continuum. From dependence to interdependence, the 7 habits are organized around 3 levels of maturity, which Covey calls the maturity continuum. Dependence represents the first stage, in which an individual is reliant on others for their needs and survival. The dependent person operates from the paradigm, "You take care of me, you come through for me, I blame you for the results." This is the natural and appropriate state for an infant, but continued dependence into adulthood is problematic. Independence represents the second stage, in which an individual is self-reliant and capable of taking care of themselves. The independent person operates from the paradigm, "I can do it, I am responsible, I am self-reliant." Achieving independence is a major achievement and is necessarily better than remaining dependent. Much of American culture celebrates and encourages independence. However, interdependence is the ultimate stage of maturity. The interdependent person operates from the paradigm, "We can do it, we can cooperate, we can combine our talents and abilities and create something greater together." In an interdependent world, a world in which most important outcomes require collaboration with others, interdependence is the most effective paradigm. The 7 habits move individuals progressively through these stages. Habits 1, 2, and 3 address personal mastery and are primarily concerned with moving from dependence to independence. Habits 4, 5, and 6 address interpersonal mastery and enable the individual to function effectively in interdependent situations. Habit 7 sustains all of this through continuous renewal. The inside-out nature of change. Why transformation is possible. Throughout the book, Covey emphasizes that significant, lasting change is always inside-out change. You cannot change your circumstances, or your relationships, or your effectiveness until you change yourself, your paradigms, your character, your habits. This is actually profoundly empowering. It means that your circumstances do not determine your destiny. Even in difficult, constraining circumstances, you retain the freedom to choose how you respond, what you focus on, what you do with the possibilities available to you. This is why the book opens with Viktor Frankl's testimony. Even in a concentration camp, where nearly all external freedoms were stripped away, Frankl retained the fundamental freedom to choose his response, his attitude, his meaning, and that choice of meaning was what saved his life and his sanity. For those not in such extreme circumstances, the implications are even more empowering. If you are willing to examine and change your paradigms, your character, and your habits, you can transform your effectiveness, your relationships, and your life. You need not wait for external circumstances to change. You need not wait for other people to change. You can begin immediately, where you are, with changing the one thing you can always control, yourself. The principle-centered approach. The foundation of all 7 habits. What holds together all 7 habits is a commitment to principle-centered living. A person operating from the principle-centered paradigm recognizes that there are timeless, universal principles that govern human effectiveness. Principles such as integrity, honesty, service, patience, respect, growth, and love. This is not a new idea. These principles have been recognized across cultures and throughout history. What is distinctive about Covey's approach is the recognition that these principles are not merely abstract ideals or moral teachings. They are practical requirements for genuine effectiveness. A person who lacks integrity, who is dishonest, who is selfish and self-centered, cannot be truly effective in the long term, no matter how many techniques they master. Conversely, a person who integrates these principles into their character, who is genuinely honest, genuinely concerned about others, genuinely growing and learning, will be effective and will create positive impact. The 7 habits, then, are not techniques for manipulating outcomes. They are practices that develop character and align you with the principles that govern genuine effectiveness. That is why they work. That is why they are sustainable. That is why they produce not just external success but genuine, lasting fulfillment. Living the habits, from knowledge to practice to transformation. Covey emphasizes a critical distinction. To learn and not to do is really not to learn. To know and not to do is really not to know. The habits are not meant to be read and intellectually understood. They are meant to be practiced and integrated into daily life. This requires what Covey calls a paradigm of habit, the recognition that habits are powerful and that changing deeply embedded habits requires consistent, deliberate practice over time. It is not possible to read about proactivity and immediately become proactive. It is not possible to read about personal mission and immediately clarify your values. These changes happen through practice, through conscious choice made repeatedly until the new pattern becomes integrated into your character. Moreover, the habits are sequential and synergistic. You cannot effectively practice habit 4. Think win-win. If you are still trapped in the victim mentality of reactivity, habit 1. You cannot practice habit 5. Seek first to understand. Without the personal security that comes from the private victories of habits 1 to 3, each habit builds on the previous ones and makes the subsequent ones more possible. Closing remarks. The legacy of principle-centered living. Stephen Covey concludes his work not with a checklist of techniques or a guarantee of success, but with a reflection on the meaning and purpose that come from living the 7 habits. He returns to the question posed in habit 2. What would you want said about your life at your funeral? This is not a morbid question. It is an invitation to authentic living. It asks, what legacy do you want to leave? What impact do you want to have? What kind of person do you want to become? What will be said about your character, your contributions, your love, your integrity? The crucial insight here is that when you align your daily choices with your deepest values and highest aspirations, when you live the 7 habits, your life naturally becomes a legacy. You become someone whose influence extends far beyond your direct interactions, far beyond your official roles, far beyond what you can measure or control. You become someone whose presence and example lift others, whose integrity provides a standard, whose growth encourages others' growth. This is the promise and the challenge of the 7 habits. Not that they are easy or that mastering them requires no effort. Not that they provide a shortcut to success or happiness. Rather, they offer a framework for building a life of genuine effectiveness, authentic relationships, continuous growth, and lasting impact. As Covey emphasizes, the greater the change and difficulty we face in our lives, the more relevant these principles become. In a world of complexity, change, and challenge, a principle-centered life provides an anchor, a compass, a direction. It enables us not just to survive in the current environment but to thrive, to grow, to contribute, to become increasingly the person we are capable of becoming. The 7 habits are not a destination but a journey. They are not a formula that, once mastered, requires no further attention. Rather, they are a way of life, a spiral of continuous improvement, growth, and alignment with principles. And that journey, when undertaken with genuine commitment and practice, transforms not just individual effectiveness but entire organizations, families, and communities. In embracing the inside-out principle, in committing to character development, in practicing the 7 habits consistently, each person who reads this book has the opportunity to become what Covey calls a highly effective person. Not merely someone who is productive and successful by external measures, but someone who is integrated, authentic, growing, contributing, and living in alignment with principles and values. That is the true promise of the 7 Habits, and that is why this book has influenced millions across generations and will continue to do so for generations to come. This is the end of book summary of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. The narration is brought to you by The Whispering Shelf. Thank you for listening.